qui sta tutto.
Hey there everyone, it's Curly here, and of course I'm with my co-host Braggy. This is episode 50 of the Unfiltered and Undiscovered podcast, and it's our pleasure today to have Steve Bell from Sonic Sherpa record store, vinyl store, right here in Brisbane. How are you, Steve?
Good, mate. How are you? Congrats on 50 episodes too. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Raise
we
the bat.
certainly didn't plan to. It's been a bit of a ride. It's one that we've thoroughly enjoyed. So we were just saying to Steve Braggy that we had a conversation this week with Mick Blood from Lime Spiders, and how much we enjoyed that, and how much we're looking forward to this episode today.
Yes, absolutely. Mick he had some of the greatest stories, didn't he, about touring the States, things like that. And he definitely, he's got a great attitude to when it comes to music. You know how he thinks it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be sharing those stories probably over 2 episodes. I think that 40-minute conversation that we had with Mick will be easily cut up into episodes, but. You know,
and he's writing a book.
He's writing a book, so, isn't that awesome?
You know, some people just sit and reminisce about the old days and do nothing about it. He's actually going to write it all down so other people can.
Yeah, if it's half as good as some of the stuff that we heard, it's going to be a rib tickler. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about your journey as at Sonic Sherpa, because you used to be in record retail in the city, and now you're at Stone's Corner here in Brizzy.
Yeah, I worked at Skinny's for a long time. The shop, one of Brisbane's greatest shops, I think, alongside Rocking Horse, I think it's fair to say. In the 2000s, my partner now in Sonic Sherpa, Simon Homer, he owned Skinny's for a long time there. And yeah, sadly, look, when there was a massive downturn in physical product there, caused by a myriad of factors, streaming and downloads, even JB to an extent coming in and sort of cost cutting on CDs, and that really affected us. And rents were going up, and we couldn't keep going anymore there for a while. That was about 2008. Things looked pretty grim for record stores. Rocking Horse looked like they were closing down for a while, but then there was a huge surge of support, which was wonderful. And they got some rent relief too, I believe, and that enabled them to get through the hard times, because maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, even longer, vinyl started coming back in a huge way. The vinyl resurgence has been something I didn't see coming. But yeah, it's been remarkable, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. People are buying turntables and starting collections. It's more than just a fad. People who grew up on streaming and music on the internet are realizing how great it is to have, artwork and liner notes and that sort of thing, and even the ritual of getting up and putting on the vinyl, on the turntable and dropping the needle and that crackle. It's something special. It's not for everyone, I get that, but more and more people are discovering it, and yeah, it's been wonderful. I mean, obviously we've been hit pretty hard by COVID in the last couple of years. That hasn't helped, but that aside, the vinyl resurgence has just been wonderful to be a part of.
Vinyl, they reinvented themselves, vinyl stores as well. So, there's a few here in LA, got coffee shops and different things like that as well. Tell us about your shop. I saw online you have gigs there as well.
Yeah, that stems back to the Skinny's days. We've still got the same PA. We used to do hundreds of installs a year at Skinny's, and it was great because we could get international bands and, your Powderfingers and all that. We're all happy to come down and play. Yeah. These days it's more local bands releasing albums, touring interstate bands, more your independent level, but it's no less exciting and fun. That's my favourite part of it. It's a really intimate chance to see these bands really close, and it sounds great, and you get to meet them, and people hang out and have a drink and talk to the artists, and it's so much fun. So yeah, we do that most weekends or when COVID permitting. Yep. But other than that, we focus on vinyl. Yep. We do still sell CDs because a lot of people don't have turntables. That's cool. And, you know, a lot of people are selling their CD collections at the moment, so we've got a massive range of secondhand CDs. But mainly we love records. So we're just sort of growing our range and trying to cater to, you know, as broad a taste as possible while still sort of keeping our core thing, which is guitars. We're pretty much guitar lovers.
You got musical instruments in there as well? Oh.
No, I just mean, guitar bands, you know.
But, I mean, I find I've got a daughter who's 24 and all her crew, I mean, obviously they're all over Spotify, but they've all got records as well. And they've all gone out and bought little cheap turntables because they loved, like you said, the ceremony of it, you know, and the reading the liner notes and the artwork, exactly like what you were saying. Yeah. And so it's kind of a weird thing. We got the digital and still the analog coexisting together, and poor old CDs seems like are they dropping off, or is that still?
They are. It's going down. Vinyl overtook CDs. Wow. I think earlier this year. Earlier last year, obviously. For the first time in a couple of decades. It's definitely on the down. You know, a lot of bands only put out vinyl or downloads, where it used to be usually only CD or download. Oh, just CD, really. But look, they're still hanging in there. I honestly think that in a few years there'll be a bit of a return to CDs in the same way as there has vinyl. There's decades of music that you can't get on Spotify. B-sides and EPs and odds and ends that are only on CDs, and I think they're going to become super collectible again.
We were speaking about The Boys last week, The Boys from Perth, and one of the best ever Aussie albums, and you can't get it on any of the streaming services. So, yeah, the lucky few that have got that album, take brag. So it's...
it's be out there, heaps of... I wouldn't think that's that rare.
You'd have to go...
No. You don't see it come through very often at the moment. Yeah. I know the record you're talking about. Yeah, it doesn't pop up secondhand very often. This is
a question for you too, Tony, because you've got a vinyl collection. How do you guys listen when you listen to your vinyl? Like, the majority of the time that I put my vinyl on is when my wife's either cooking in the evening, and this is another mix of the digital and the analog. We bought a Bluetooth speaker because we didn't want to go into the living room where the nice stereo is. You know, we wanted to talk in the kitchen. So we've got the vinyl. We bought another turntable that's Bluetooth. So we listen to analog through that sort of thing, which I think is cool. So and the way we listen to it is, and she'll cook or whatever. And the way we listen to it, read the liner notes on the back or talk about, because I'm always getting a new record and talk about, you know, this band and stuff. So I'm just wondering how you guys, Tony, when you put it on, is it both you and Sharon, or you just do you crank it and dance to it?
Well, when we had the bar in the garage, I'd set up the bar. I'd set up a DJ console. So I had the two turntables and a mixer and big speakers. And Friday afternoons were just awesome because I'd always make sure I was home by about 4 and I'm having a couple of beers. But by the time Sharon would get home, she'd be charging into the bar saying, "Turn it down, the neighbours don't want to hear it." So it was like I was an 18-year-old kid at school at home again. But how I listen to it now, I've actually got the old stereo out the back under the TV in my back deck. So I listen to my music out there, my vinyl's out there. So
okay. And Steve, are you an audiophile, or are you just like to listen to the whatever the music?
I've got a good stereo I bought years ago. I'm not really. I wouldn't call myself an audiophile. I'm a Luddite, but yeah, I don't listen to Spotify and stuff like that. I just listen to my records. I've still got a lot of CDs from that era too. I've got walls of CDs, and I listen to CDs in my car. I burn a lot of my a lot of the vinyl comes with downloads these days, which sort of confuses even more. So I get the vinyl, listen to that at home, but I'll burn a CD and listen in the car as well, or to play it in the shop. So you sort of get the best of both worlds with most of them, which is cool.
So what sort of records are popular nowadays? Is it current artists, or is it a bit of that rewind stuff that, the older stuff?
There was an interesting article in The Atlantic recently saying that people are listening to all older music at the moment. I talked about it on another podcast, Press Play, just the other day. I don't really agree with that. I think there's still a huge push of new music coming through on records and on all formats. There's still great bands around at the moment. Sometimes you have to look a little harder because, so many people are putting out music on different avenues. But, a lot of people are, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of people are starting out on their vinyl voyage, so to speak. So they are buying a lot of those old classics that they love, their old favourites. Like we saw so many copies of, say, Fleetwood Mac Rumours or Jeff Buckley, Grace. It's just because people want that to start. They're the favourite albums of a lot of people, so they go back and they buy their dozen classic records and then build from there. So we do sell a lot of old stuff. We sell a lot of second-hand records, obviously, so a lot of 70s and 80s. Some people only go straight to that. They just want first pressings from the older records. Everyone's different. There's this huge cross-section of record buyers at the moment. It started off older, skewing older, but so many young people in there going through the racks and crates at the moment. It's awesome.
Heaps in my local record store, heaps of young kids in there. What about genres of records? What do you reckon is the most popular there?
Well, we skew a bit independent, alternative, but mainly it reflects, broader tastes, really. Like Adele, for instance, pressed up, I think, 500,000, LPs and blocked vinyl production all around the world for a couple of months there when her recent album came out. People do buy a lot of mainstream stuff. I mean, we don't really sort of focus on that, but it's everything. We have got a good metal section. Sell a lot of dance music, a lot of soundtracks. People love soundtracks. That's weird. It's really broad, the range of things that people. I guess people have.
I know I do have collections within collections. So you'll see something and you go, "Oh, that's cool." It might be your normal genre, and then you find another one, and all of a sudden you've got another little collection in your collection. Yeah. So you know what I mean.
Yeah, so Braggy, how often would you visit your favourite record shop?
I'd go there every week usually, or every second week maybe. It's usually because I've got something that I can't afford, and so I'll just put it on. I'll just pay $20 on it, and then when I walk past it again, because it's only up the road. When I walk past again, I'll drop in and give them another $20.
So do you have customers like that?
So my wife doesn't know I've bought a $200 record. So no, I've bought $200.
We get asked to hide them in different discreet bags too, for that same reason.
She likes it when I buy records.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's the most expensive record you've ever had in the shop? Like maybe something signed, or is it just a rare one, or?
We've had some really expensive Violent Soho, keeping it local, vinyl come through recently and go for pretty exorbitant cost, because some of that band's so immensely popular, but the vinyl runs, their first self-titled album, it came out on Thurston Moore's Ecstatic Peace label over in the States, and I think there was only 100 copies.
Okay. Wow.
Printed, so we got hands on a couple of those, and they were going for ludicrous prices. Which is a shame. I mean, I wish that those records were available. We'd sell so many of them. It's just a supply and demand thing with some of those. They tend to be the ones that sell for ridiculous prices, is when there was just such a small quantity, and people will realise that there's very few chances, so they'll
be the investment
pay overs to get them.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But the other thing too is there's a pretty big awareness now that vinyl's worth a lot of money, or can be worth a lot of money. So you're finding less and less really great treasures in collections, because people check them on Discogs and things before selling, and which is great. I'm not saying, it's their record. That's great. But you'd often buy a box of records off someone, for a small amount of money, and then realise that one of them. And usually you don't know either. I don't know every record what they're worth,
Yeah.
You'll go to price one online and just go, holy crap, it's $500 or something. But that used to happen a lot. Not so much these days. Yeah, people are a bit more savvy.
Is that a good way to evaluate your records on Discogs? Yeah, that's what most people do.
Discogs? Oh, you got to take it with a grain of salt. A lot of people are just fishing, and it's all about condition and that as well. People will go on there and see that some guy is selling, a mint one for $800 or whatever, and then think that they're ratty. Different pressings worth a fortune as well, and so it can be misleading. But if you know what you're doing, it's a really great resource.
And it's always, you've got to find someone willing to pay for it. So it's the same with, businesses. It's the same with records. A record's only worth as much as someone's prepared to pay for it. You can price it at $500, but if it's going to sit there for 4 or 5 years and not even get looked at, it's really not worth $500.
Yeah, and in a global sense, we sometimes forget that Brisbane's we're in the underside of the planet, in the suburbs of the third biggest city or whatever. It's very, very remote on a global scale, so we can't really expect to sell stuff walk-in for the same price that someone in New York, for instance, would be able to. So you got to factor all that sort of stuff in.
I had a question I forgot now.
Do you ship right around the world, Steve?
Yeah, we do. We've got customers everywhere. It's random some of the places we end up sending stuff in Scandinavia and that. Buying Brisbane records and a lot of them are buying Australian stuff too. It's usually it's really interesting.
Is your store a big store, or is it like a little pokey? It's probably not going to be about medium.
We've outgrown it, so I'd like it to be bigger. It's not tiny. When we do in-stores, we might get, I think the most we've had in there is about 80, and that's really packed. So it's not huge or anything, but, it's substantial. We've got a lot of records in there.
I've been looking at some of your social media, and you seem to do a shot of the store every now and again with, on a cloudy sky and then related back to song lyrics or something. I think that's pretty cool.
That's good.
You just social media. I got handballed that, and I'd never been on social media before, so I've been learning on the trot. I am a journalist. I've been interviewing bands and stuff 20 years. I was editor of Time Off for 10 years, and stuff like that. So writing, it's not like I'm bad at that, but I've been learning socials on the fly, and with those photos of the shop in the sky, for some reason, every time I put one up, it just gets so many likes. It's crazy. We learnt that out. We said we've just got to keep putting them up. So about every few weeks, I'll whack one up, and bam, we get heaps of engagement. I don't get why.
The formula, mate.
But we're on a tea towel from one of we put out a new tea towel with that same vista on it this year that someone drew in pen and ink watercolor. Yeah, it looks amazing, and it's literally that same shot.
I just think there's something about record shops. When I was going to school, it was, on a Thursday afternoon, you'd jump on the train, you'd go to Indooroopilly Shopping Town, you'd go up to Harlequin. Not that Harlequin was the greatest of record stores, and just that sense of exploration, going through, looking at the records, pulling them out. Even if you owned it, you'd still pull it out and read it. It was just, it's an experience. Records are an experience.
Yeah, you know what? It's a slower way. It's the slower way of life. You like we said, you put it on. There's like Steve says, it's a ceremony. You put it on, everyone slows down a bit. You're kind of away from that. Put the Spotify on, put the playlist on. Let it go.
And people listen to full albums more too when they're using vinyl, because this is, I've been told anecdotally, people tend to just pick their favourite songs and listen to, or playlists, and when you buy a record, you listen to it as the band intended it over the two sides, and it's a better experience. That, to me anyway. I'm obviously a massive music nerd, but I just find that huge. I love that album experience, and it's sad that people haven't been getting that, but exciting that they're rediscovering it.
People just release this stuff on Spotify, like the big artists. If they put an album out, do they think about the order? Well, I guess they think about the order as in just one side, don't they? Even though you can pick and choose.
Yeah,
Even though you can
sequencing's
pick
still
and choose.
important. I mean, you still
Yeah.
want it to flow and sort of be a special journey, and it can make a huge difference, the sequencing of records, but it's it's definitely an art form when you're on vinyl and you've got to curate, like you said,
Yeah,
the first side
Got to
and
curate two
finish
starts,
that
two
on a
stops.
note
Got to
that,
curate two endings. It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
two endings. It's
But if
like
you get it right,
like a
it's
two-act
wonderful,
play. There's a lot more art, thinking and art into it.
So that strums up a question for me. Which albums are the ones that stand out, that really got those two sides, those two starts and two stops right?
Oh God, that's a tough question.
it's a tough question, Curly, on the
The
spot.
classic is Dark Side of the Moon, I guess. Would you say?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not a massive Floyd fan, but I mean, people say that is that's one of the ones that's cited in Mojo and what have you as the great record sort of on vinyl. Yeah, I don't know, mate. Like I need to go away and think about that. I'll be thinking about that tonight at midnight, I reckon.
You've been putting on all your favourites, guys. Does this start well? Does this favourite?
Sorry to do that to you, but I personally sorry to do that to you, but I.
It's a great question. I
think
feel
Bat Outta
bad I
Hell
don't have
was
any
one of those-
examples.
one of those albums, really good, tight front, and then the second side of the B side was almost just as good in my mind, just a different sort of flow of songs. So in my mind, I think Bat Outta Hell was one of those, but that's it's all our own personal choice, isn't it? Tattoo You by the Rolling Stones.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm even thinking of a Status Quo album that finished with Living on an Island. I've forgotten the name of the album now. So, but that was another one that's started well and finished well. I think so. Yeah, it's an interesting question.
We'll have to do a show on that, Curly.
Yeah, we might have to get Steve back after he's thought about it and say
That'd be fantastic because this is going to kill me for weeks now. The more I think about it,
and go, this is why I think it starts well.
Yeah.
This is why I think the second act continues on from the first.
Absolutely.
That's a good question.
just as an aside, Curly, I would have been bumping shoulders with you at Harlequin way back in the day. Like I've been here in Taringa forever.
Yeah.
That was my local for a while. Yeah. I used to shop in town a lot, obviously, but went locally always straight to Harlequin.
We enjoyed Harlequin, but going into town and going to Rocking Horse or even Kent Records in Elizabeth Street was just awesome.
Kent Records was great too.
I still remember, Steve, when CDs first started coming out and people were saying that they were like indestructible and all this stuff. I tell you what, I don't think people have as much affinity with their CD collection, and I certainly don't, because I think I did treat them like shit. Whereas the vinyl was just we treated vinyl with care, and I don't think that especially when CDs first came out, I don't think we did that with CDs.
Maybe.
You're right though. That was the most misleading. That was sold as a huge. It was a selling point for CDs.
Right.
As they're indestructible. That was rubbish. Right. That was so easily destroyed. You're right though. Vinyl's such a fragile medium. People do tend to take care of it more if they're got a connection to their collection. We do get a lot of really badly scratched stuff through. So, when you buy second hand, we don't resell that. But so not everyone looks after it. But when you love your collection, you put it. It defines you in a way. People do use that to sort of. It's your own identity in your record collection, so you look after that.
A lot of the records I have, a lot of the ones I buy are devalued because they got writing on them. But I don't mind that if it's
product of.
I buy it for the record, but I kind of do like if it's on the back, it's got to Sue from Steve. Thanks for letting me stay at your place. I just love that little. That's someone else has had this, and there's a story. They've been sitting and listening to it.
Or property of FM 104.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. But so I don't really mind if it's got the writing on it, or if the cover's a bit ratty. As long as it plays well, I'm happy.
I agree. It shows that particular album's had a voyage and another life and has been listened to. I always think about that when I'm playing secondhand records. I wonder who bought this, wonder who listened to it, did they like it, you know? Yeah, and I really do like those messages. It tended to be something people did write on their records a lot back in the 60s and 70s, just going through so much secondhand stuff as I do. It doesn't happen as much these days. Like, you don't get many newer records through with writing on it, so it's a generational thing. But you get letters in them sometimes too. You'll pull out
like the girls put a heart around one of the guys. You know? It's like, I love that guy in the I love that. Like, I got a bit of a collection of you know, like Ripper 76 and all those K-Tel sort of things. I got a little bit of a section there, and heaps of them have got hearts and shit on it. I love it. Hearts and shit on it. I love it.
Look, we sell so many of those comps, that the ones I used to have on tape back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, whatever. They're still really collectible now on vinyl. They're not worth a fortune or anything, but a lot of people love to accumulate them all. It seems.
And speaking of tapes, I mean, the old days of having to get the old pencil and wind the tape back up after it got caught in the mechanism. I mean, truly.
We sell quite a lot of tapes, hey? It's bizarre. And a lot a lot of cars, strangely, still only have tape decks. People driving older vintage cars, I guess. And after Guardians of the Galaxy, that movie came out, there was a big resurgence in Walkman. A lot of the kids wanted to go out and they were buying Walkman from all the cash converters everywhere. So they were all buying cassettes. It's a fragile medium too, but like, they sound pretty good. It's still analog and tape and everything. If you've got a good tape player and the tape's in good nick, tapes can sound pretty great.
My daughter went to a experimental music night here in Adelaide, and there's a guy who did a whole DJ set just on tapes.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, I don't know how he did it, and she couldn't quite explain to me how he did it, but she said, no, Dad, he had 3 tape decks, and he did a whole DJ set with tapes. So, no.
You don't see that very often.
No.
A lot of younger bands are selling tapes at gigs and stuff. It's an easy thing to buy, and you might have a download code in it as well, like we were saying before with records.
Yeah. Wow.
So a lot of people buy them just to have something and support the band. There's more awareness now that bands don't get money on Spotify and things like that unless you get Coldplay level streams. They might start seeing some coin, but your average local band that we'll go and see at the pub doesn't make any money off streaming. So people like to buy a tape or a record or what have you, a t-shirt even, to make sure some money's going directly to the band. I think that's been behind a lot of the vinyl upswing as well.
So Steve, are you a muso as well, or just a punter, as we say?
No, I was a footy player. Yeah, I was a sports guy. Like, I never played an instrument once, but I was just obsessed with music from a really young age. I don't know why. Yeah, and I fought it. I was actually a lawyer for quite a while, and pretty good one too. But I just hated getting out of bed every day, and I quit that and started. That's when I started working at Skinnies, and I was managing bands and writing for Time Off, and a lot less money, but so much more fun and better life experience. So no, I never played any music. I've always lived with musos, and they're all my friends. But
you're a Renaissance
never been tempted
fan,
even really. Broke Renaissance.
So who is your favourite band?
Ooh.
It's a controversial question. There's a lot of people argue about this. I'd definitely say Pavement, from the 90s band from the States. I've seen them in 10 countries, I think, so that probably
are they a
takes
punky
the
sort
cake.
of band?
Yeah.
Indie rock.
No, it's indie rock. It's it's really great, just sort of laid back. It was in the 90s, they came through at that time when post Kurt, everything was so super earnest and serious, and they were sort of slacker and laid back, and it was just this massive breath of fresh air. My partner Shelley and I run an indie label called Coolin' by Sound out of the shop, and I've put out Spiral, a guitar player from Pavement's albums here in Australia a few times, and sort of got to know them. And
cool.
But no, they'd be my favourite. But I've got massively wide tastes. It's mainly Australian stuff. I grew up in Melbourne in the 80s, and I was able to go to bands from when I was about 15, even though I looked about 10, because there was just no photo ID or anything back then. You could just wave a leaflet at them and they'd let you in. So I grew up just watching all the pub rocks, the Australian stuff, everyone from, weddings, parties, anything, and Tism and the Johnnies and Painters and Dockers and, even bands like Lime Spiders you were talking about before, them and the Stems and just whoever was playing through I still can't believe how many amazing Australian bands there are given the size of our country and population.
That time, the 80s,
pound for pound, our music scene's amazing. Hoodoo Gurus, there's just Oils, Aussie Crawl, I was just so many great bands.
And there was always a buzz going around about bands. I still remember the buzz around Boom Crash Opera as they were coming through and playing gigs and they were getting noticed. And, some of those Melbourne bands that you just talked about, when we talked to Mick Blood from the Lime Spiders, he talked about Radio Birdmen and, who do you go see on a weekend when there's so many bands there? But you just rattled off thousands of bands in Melbourne. So I just think it was...
I've got the Radio Birdman logo tattooed on my back pretty big, so I mean they're one I'm quite au fait with. I used to manage bands too, and we got to go on tour with them a couple of times. I was the happiest person in the world, I reckon, around then, just watching them.
And Died Pretty, of course, was out of Melbourne, so just a magical time for Australian music.
Well, Died Pretty have got really strong Brizzy connections too, through Brett Meyer and Ron Pino lived up here and played in bands for a while. They were the 31st and the End. I
sort
of
was going
very strong
out with a
Brizzy
girl
roots.
from Noosa after school, and we'd go to one of the hotels. I've forgotten the name, and Brett Myers would often be there. So I presumed he was a bit of a local boy. So big, tall fella.
He is a big guy, isn't he? Yeah. They're a great band though too, obviously. Hope to do one of the Rewind podcasts on Doughboy Hollow soon.
Absolutely. Doughboy Hollow is just one of those classic albums. And I think Ron Pino is just a master with words. Just he's a poet. So, awesome.
Tell us a bit more about the...
I drove through Doughboy Hollow recently. I was driving from Sydney to Brisbane and there was floods and they diverted you through this old way. I've never been through these towns and stuff, and I got to this sort of clearing and then there was a river and stuff and the big sign Doughboy Hollow, and I'm like, oh my God. And then randomly I ran into Ron Pino at Rocking Horse Records here in Brizzy about a week later, and I said to him, I told him that anecdote, and he goes, yeah, that's the road you used to have to drive through, drive down to get to Sydney to play and everything, and we'd always cross Doughboy Hollow on, in our travels to gigs and stuff, and it just stuck. I couldn't believe it. I always thought it was some World War I reference.
And the other interesting thing around Doughboy Hollow is when they released it, I think they re-released it in the 2000s, and they put out all the demo tracks. And it's interesting when you hear the finished track, and this is something that Bragg and I have talked about with a band that we have interviewed from the States called Blind Season. He sent us a couple of tracks for our Christmas show that was just forming. So, but Died Pretty have put their demo tracks for that particular album out to the wider consumption, and the lyrics are different, the tempo's different. It's just really interesting to see the finished product and where it all started. So I love Died Pretty.
Yeah, it's always great to see those songs come together. It's fascinating, endlessly fascinating to me to see how they change and evolve, and why and how they end up from where they started. It's amazing. I've interviewed so many songwriters. It's still this incredible mysterious art to me. I never tire about asking them and getting them to explain how the inspiration comes, and just it seems sort of magical to me.
Sometimes things will
pulling
change
these songs out of the
like just before you're about to do a take. Oh no, hang on, I'll do it this way, something like that. That's what you're right. It's incredible how what one little seed comes from, one little seed of an idea. Yeah.
You're talking about, it sounds like I'm name dropping now. I was talking to Paul Kelly on that Rewind, Curly. Yeah, well, I'll quickly, I'll just tell this anecdote about Paul Kelly was mentioning why he changed the lyrics in How to Make Gravy from always used to have too much cologne to doesn't like
That's a
Nina
much better line.
Simone. And
Yeah.
and it's been in his live set for years, and then he just re-recorded it for the Christmas Train record last Christmas, and he used that version. And I was asking what prompts the change, and he said, just came into my mind one night. And I sang it and I liked it, and just so sometimes there's no reason for them either, which just adds to the mystique to me,
So like another older star. So I just
and his biggest song is Police and Thieves, that the Clash covered and everything. So there's all these theories on the internet that meant that old mate from How to Make Gravy was in prison for theft, because that's why I mentioned Junior Marvin. And I said to Paul, is that right? And he's like, I don't think so, And I'm like, he sort of alluded to maybe that was part of it. I don't know. It was hard. He's very inscrutable sometimes in a wonderful, wonderful way.
That's so cool.
Look, the podcast, it's an extension of something I used to do in time off, and the music as it was later known. Just the anniversary of, great Australian albums and events, like I'd do Big Day Out or Somersault, Alternative Nation, things like that. The ones that got the really great traction would be Australian albums, like Midnight Oil or Gurus or Go-Betweens. People love going back and reading. People in Australia love reading about Australian albums. No one's really writing about it that much. People are, but not as much as, big overseas ones. So the bosses from that's now evolved into an organisation called Euphony. They asked me to transition from print into podcasts, and we decided to focus on classic Australian albums and events. And we've done a couple of songs, like obviously Gravy, and I did Dale Braithwaite, The Horses. Spoke to him for a few hours about that, and but mainly it's albums, and we speak to the bands and the managers and the producers and labels, and try and give a sort of more rounded overview of what was happening at the time and what went into it, and there's always stories. There's always, you got to find the story. Any album's genesis has got its own interesting take there somewhere, and they've been going great. Like I've had a couple go to number one on Apple and Spotify music charts. But just the feedback and everything, it's just been, and it's so much fun for me. Like, you can't do an interview and write it in print and get people to read 10,000 words. It's just not a thing. Like, people's attention span isn't that great. But some of these podcasts go for 6 or 7 hours, split up into numerous episodes. Like the Triffids Born Sanity Devotional one is, I think, the longest.
Yeah.
But people happy to go on that journey because you can listen to the podcast while you're doing the dishes, like you were saying, or on a walk, or doing exercise. So it's just been wonderful, and we can throw in the songs. I play heaps of songs, and relevant to the episodes, obviously. I've just been really enjoying it. I did an amazing one, the last one that came out, Archie Roach, Charcoal Lane. It was just such a pleasure to spend time with Archie, and Paul Kelly was involved in that too, because he and Steve Connolly produced that one. So Paul gave me time for that as well. They've been really great. Yeah. I'm loving it. I'd never even really listened to a podcast before. Now I really enjoy them. But it's a left turn that I didn't see coming, but it's been fantastic.
That's excellent. Steve, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Really enjoyed it. Now, just bear with us, just hang around, because we do a segment called the Undiscovered 7-inch that we pull out of our record collection. And
you do yours, Curly, because I'm changed my mind on mine.
Okay, are you?
I'm going to go.
Well, I'm going to do this one.
Okay, you do that.
So this is a band called the Hard Ons, and it's their very first single, I believe, Surfing on My Face. And I saw them, in all honesty, for the first time back in when the Gurus did their Stone Age Romeos tour just recently. Dig It Up, that was it. And we saw them down in Melbourne. and the Hard Ons was just like this wall of sound. They supported him that day, and then Died Pretty followed. But it was like a wall of sound. I have never felt that ever before. Just a wall of sound that almost knocks you over. They were that loud, that amazing. It's just blown me away. And that's always been just one of those songs that when it plays on the Spotify playlist, it's just one of those songs that just brings me back to car trips with my mates. So, honestly, just awesome. So that was the Hard Ons.
I love that band. I've seen them so many times over the journey. I know a couple of them pretty well. When you talk about how loud they were, I saw them support the Ramones down in Melbourne at Festival Hall in 1991.
Yeah.
And they must have, because they were playing with the Ramones, thought, wow, we've got to make this loud. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard, to the point of, at one point, Rayan put down his bass to breathe fire. He used to do this shtick where, I don't know how you do it. You put something in your mouth and you breathe out fire. He put his bass down, breathed fire, picked it up and started playing again. And you couldn't hear one iota difference in the sound from when he was playing and when he wasn't playing. And they're a three-piece. Like, it was to my friends and I just went, oh, let's go and have a smoke outside. This is crazy. Yeah. Like, we love them, but it was too loud. So they can be a wall of noise.
The time that I saw them, and I just had never felt that. I've seen a lot of bands loud. We saw Lime Spiders in 87, I think, at the Canberra Hotel, and it was just, that was Distortion City, because I just don't think the room was set up acoustically for him. But that Hard Ons gig was just the first time I ever felt it was like this physical thing that was just whacking us. Plus,
what year was that?
That was probably 2013, I'm thinking. It wasn't that long ago. So
they've changed a lot now too. So you've seen them now, and they're a bit more metally. Like in those early days, in that, like, songs like There Was a Time and that, from that 7-inch you got there, and Surfing on My Face, they were really pop. They were masters of pop in a punky sort of underground indie context. Like, they were really, really great with pop hooks. Girl in the Sweater and stuff like that. But these days, these days they're more into sort of doom and louder stuff, and oscillates between all those different ones. So they weren't always just sort of so heavy. They're like a great
survivor too, aren't they? So I reckon back in the early days, now I've never met them and I don't know them, but you almost get the feeling that they were just there to see how long it would take for someone to wake up to them, or to put it out there and just keep putting it out there. And they're still playing now, they're still gigging, they're still putting out music. So
did you hear the recent album they put out with Tim Rogers as a member now? UMI frontman Tim Rogers joined and is writing songs. There's a full album with him singing, and it's awesome.
I was going to say, have to check that out.
Yeah. Because there was supposed to be a huge anniversary push for Hard Ons, and there was a documentary that was made, I believe, and then had to be pulled because then there was, unfortunately, a Me Too sort of esque controversy about one of the members, a drummer that's not really in the band anymore. But that was enough for them to lose all that funding and everything for the doco, and they were really down and out after what was supposed to be this huge year. And I think that's why they were a huge influence on him pre-UMI. Like, he used to go and see them all the time, so I think he sort of was trying to help pull them up by their bootstraps, so to speak. So, but that record with Tim Rogers and the Hard Ons is really, really great. It only came out 3 or 4 months ago.
So what have you got, Braggy?
Well, when Steve was talking about the drive from Brisbane to Sydney, I used to go and see this band at the Townsville Uni. Did you ever go there, Ty? No, it was before.
I went
after that, Tony.
I went and saw
to the Bludgers Club.
I saw Painters and Dockers
at James Cook.
JCU.
At James Cook.
Yeah, I took my wife to be there, and after the first 2 songs, she'd left and sat in the car.
I saw the Hoodoo Gurus there.
Oh, the Dockers are amazing.
They were a loud band, the Hoodoos. And I think that those PAs too from the 80s, had the big 4-way or 3-way PA. They just ripped your head off a lot of times too. So I'm surprised that it was too loud for you, like 2017. Most of the PA sound, unless they just had an old PA. I don't know. This is a band I used to go and see at the James Cook Uni. It's not a picture disc, unfortunately, but it's the Big Five, and they had a song called Hume Highway. I don't know if anyone remembers them. The Big Five? It's reggae.
What sort of stuff
Australian
is it?
reggae.
Oh.
Australian
Was
reggae.
down, was it?
Fucking idiot. Yeah. There you go. That way. Rhythm Style Records. They had a song called Hume Highway about driving from the thing. But they were, That's surprising.
Yeah.
You haven't heard of that.
The Zimmerman.
Because I've growing up in a small town like Townsville, you didn't get a lot of bands, like you guys. I'm jealous.
Well, the Zimmerman.
One of the bands I managed for many years, the Giants of Science, were from Townsville. Well, a lot of them were from Townsville, so I heard many stories.
From Townsville.
They were a great band. I saw them open for Hoodoo Gurus at Expo in '88 on the one day I went there because I still lived in Melbourne, and I thought the Spliffs were awesome. And then John Watson went on to.
He wrote for Rolling Stone for a bit too, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. He's the very first Rewind podcast I did was 25 years of Silverchair Frog Stomp, and he was their manager and their label before that. And he's a great guy. And
I knew him. He used to play in a band in Townsville called the Indecisives before the Spliffs, and we were the other band called Room 16. And then when we split, they took their drummer Andrew Reid, and he joined the Spliffs. Yeah, but that's all right. That's all right.
You're a good guy. You've got no lingering animosities. You let it go.
I remember him asking me once, because I wrote the songs for those guys, asked me once, how do you write the songs? I said, fuck, I don't know how to write the song. I just make shit up. So, anyway, no, he's a great guy. Anyway,
That's what Paul Kelly said, essentially, yeah.
I mean, I like it. Yeah, you got to tell a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway.
All right, let's wind her up. Steve, just hang around just after we close off. Don't forget, everyone, we've got follow us, of course, wherever you're listening to this, whatever podcast platform, or on YouTube. Don't forget our playlist that we've got on Spotify. Unfortunately, we don't have it on vinyl. You've got to go to Spotify. All those bands that we've spoken to or spoken about, we put them into the Unfiltered and Undiscovered podcast. Next week, we will have the first part of our conversation with Mick Blood from the Lime Spiders. If you love the Lime Spiders, head over, like their Facebook page, and help Mick get this book up. He's written a book. It's taken 6 years of labour and love, and some of the stories that he shares with us over the next 2 episodes, if they're an indicator of what's in the book, it's going to be a rollicking good read. And as per always, in the words of Jagger and Richards, it's only rock and roll, but we love it. We'll see you all again next week.
Thank you.
Qui sta tutto.